Once upon a time, in the great kingdom of Umocha, there lived a blind maid whose name was Anwuli. She swept the palace floors perfectly, although her eyes saw nothing. She was the prince's personal maid, chosen by the chief priest himself. Everyone was shocked when Anwuli was chosen. She was the only daughter of the popular village hunter, and the people wondered why a blind girl had to be the one to serve their next king, when the village had hundreds of beautiful young women whose eyes were still intact. In fact, the entire village revolted, stating that Anwuli be replaced by another maiden. They chose Chinaza, the daughter of the popular village elder who had always wanted his daughter to marry the prince. However, on the very day that they all gathered to demand this, a heavy thunderstorm shook the skies. The clouds turned dark as lightning tore across the heavens. A great voice thundered from the heavens, filling the entire village with extreme fear.
Touch not even a hair on her body, for if any harm comes to her, the entire village will answer. The girl who has been chosen will be the one who must serve the prince, or else a great calamity will befall the entire village.
Fear gripped the people as they scattered like dry leaves before the wind. And from that day on, no one dared to question why Anwuli had been chosen, not even the king. Anwuli moved into the palace to serve the prince, who hated her with a passion. For all these years, the prince had waited patiently to be assigned a personal maid. He had heard stories of how most personal maids eventually became queens of the land, how many of them rose from simple service into the throne itself, stories that made people look forward to being chosen. But when Anwuli was brought to him, his heart turned black with rage. A blind girl? He shouted. Is this the insult the gods sent to me? Am I not worthy of beauty, of perfection, of a woman whose eyes are clear? His pride burned hotter than fire, and from that day, he despised Anwuli with all that he had. Prince Obidi made Anwuli's life bitter. He mocked her in the presence of his friends, poured water on the floors that she had just scrubbed. Prince Obidi made her carry heavy loads and laughed as she stumbled. Despite this, Anwuli moved with such accuracy that many even began to doubt her blindness. She moved around the palace like a natural, without bumping into anything. If anyone knew the palace, it was Anwuli. Her fingers had memorized every corner, every crack, every hidden part, as though the walls themselves whispered to her very hands. One morning, the prince marched out of his chamber, claiming that someone had stolen his signet ring, a ring that his father the king passed down to him when he turned 18. My ring is missing, he thundered. The signet ring my father gave to me on my 18th birthday has been stolen. Prince Obidi thundered as the entire palace froze. The prince's eyes darted like a hawk. Then suddenly, he pointed at Anwuli, who was standing in the corner. It is her, he roared. The blind maid. Who else could it be? She moves around this palace like a spirit. She knows every corner, every crack. She must have taken my ring to enrich herself, Prince Obidi said as gasps filled the air. All eyes turned to Anwuli, who stood there quiet. Search her room, tear it apart if you must, but find my ring. The guards rushed into Anwuli's small quarters. They lifted her sleeping mat and searched the entire room, but no ring was found. It's impossible, Prince Obidi screamed as he ordered them to search it again, but still the ring was not found. Frustrated, the prince stormed into Anwuli's room himself. He dug through her belongings, his hands trembling with rage as he searched. But truly, the ring was not there. Impossible, he muttered to himself, knowing that he put the ring there himself. How is it not here? He thought to himself as he stormed back to his chambers, furious and confused. However, when he entered his room, his steps faltered as the ring sat on his dresser untouched. Obidi staggered backwards, his mouth falling open. His heart raced. No, no, this cannot be. He had planted the ring in Anwuli's room with his own hands. He had hidden it beneath her mat himself. How then did it find its way back to his room? Prince Obidi thought to himself as his face turned pale. For the very first time, Prince Obidi felt a fear that he could not explain. He sat on the edge of his bed, sweat dripping down his forehead as his chest rose and fell like a beaten drum. The prince knew what he had done. He had planned to disgrace Anwuli before the entire palace, to prove to all that Anwuli was nothing but a cunning thief. However, seeing the ring on his dresser made him tremble as he wondered how it got there. No one had gained access to his room that morning except himself, and the prince could not deny that something was definitely wrong. From that day on, however, strange things began to happen. When the prince poured water on the floor to watch Anwuli stumble, it was he who slipped and landed in disgrace, spraining his own ankle. He released ants into her mat so she would be beaten in her sleep. But when he woke up the next morning, his own bed crawled with ants, biting him until he screamed like a child. Prince Obidi was so terrified, he thought of a way to deal with Anwuli to make sure that she doesn't end up with him. So he decided to choose a woman from the village to date. His friends introduced him to Chinaza, the same woman who the people presented earlier to replace Anwuli as the prince's maid. Prince Obidi paraded Chinaza in the palace as his woman, boasting that Chinaza was the kind of woman who was worthy to stand beside the king, not a blind crawling maid whose father was not worthy to clean his shoes. Chinaza smiled sweetly, knowing that her plan to become the queen was finally becoming a reality. She hated Anwuli with all of her heart, as she saw Anwuli as a threat. In her eyes, Anwuli was not just a maid. She was the barrier that the gods had placed between her and the throne that she so desperately desired. So, Chinaza made up her mind to send Anwuli away. She approached Anwuli one night whilst Anwuli was cleaning the king's chair in his throne room. "Blind maid," she whispered as she stood face to face with Anwuli, whose head was bowed in respect. "You do not belong here. I give you 2 days to leave the palace willingly, or else what will be left of you will be your corpse." Anwuli, who had heard such venom in Prince Obidi's voice many times before, only bowed her head and replied her saying, "If the gods want me gone, then gone I shall be. But if the gods have planted me here, then no hand can uproot me." Chinaza gave her a hot slap across her face. "How dare you speak to me in such a manner? You useless maid. I will teach you that no one crosses me and lives to tell the story," she said to Anwuli, who she pushed into the king's chair, forcing her to sit. Chinaza had finally found a way to deal mercilessly with Anwuli. Not only would this send her packing from the palace, Anwuli would also face death for defiling the king's throne. She ran out screaming abomination as the entire palace gathered, eager to hear what she had to say. Tears streamed down Chinaza's face as she began to narrate how the blind maid defiled the king's throne. She sat upon it, laughing like a queen, mocking the blood of our fathers. Gasps filled the air as the guards looked at each other in horror. Everyone knew that sitting on the king's throne was a crime punishable by death. The king, unable to believe what he had just heard, walked to his throne room to see for himself. He arrived at the throne room and met Anwuli standing next to the throne crying. The king's eyes widened in disbelief, his heart burning with rage. "Blind girl," he roared, "do you mock me? Do you think your blindness gives you license to insult the throne of Umocha?" Anwuli fell to her knees instantly, her broom dropping to the floor. "My king," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I did not sit here by choice. I was pushed." "Silence," Chinaza said before Anwuli could finish. "Do you hear her? She dares to lie even before your face, my king. I saw her with my own eyes. She sat there, beating the throne with her broom, saying that one day the throne will be hers." The crowd gasped as the whispers grew louder. Could it be true? Could the maid truly desire the throne? The people whispered amongst themselves as the king's face hardened. Filled with rage, the king ordered that Anwuli be locked away until the truth comes to light. Chinaza could not believe her ears. She thought the king would order that Anwuli be killed immediately for defiling his throne. She rushed home, her heart beating, as she stormed into her father's compound. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Papa," she cried, "the plan failed. Anwuli has only been locked away. If the gods reveal the truth, I am finished. You must do something, Papa. You must." Her father, Elder Okeke, was a man feared across Umocha. Though he sat in the king's council, Many whispered that his tongue was as sharp as poison, and his hands were dipped in charms. He looked at his trembling daughter and clenched his jaw. Calm down, my child, he said slowly. If the king has not killed her, then we will kill her ourselves. The gods may protect her in the palace, but there are far greater powers, and I know exactly who to meet. That same night, Chinazad's father went deep into the forest where no man dared to tread. The path was dark and filled with the cries of owls and unseen creatures. Hours passed, and he arrived at the shrine of the most feared Dibia in all the land. His shrine was surrounded by human skulls, as Chinazad's father fell to his knees to sing his praises before telling him the reason why he came. The great Dibia, my daughter must be made queen, Chinazad's father said to the Dibia, who asked what exactly he wanted him to do for him. She is standing in my daughter's way, so I want her dead. Kill her, snuff out the life out of her, and I promise to make you a very rich man once my daughter becomes queen, he said to the Dibia, who smiled and began to sing some incantations, assuring him that his wish had been granted. Go home and await the good news, he said to Chinaza's father, who journeyed back home, happy that his plan was finally becoming a reality. However, what he did not know was that his plan was going to backfire in a way that he never imagined possible. Morning came, and news began to spread that the king of the village was dead. Amuli, who they thought would die, was still alive and well in the palace prison. The death of the king threw the kingdom into deep mourning. The town crier beat his gong through the village, announcing that according to the ancient laws, a new king must be crowned within 24 hours. If not, the throne will pass to another family. Prince Obidi was filled with pride. His girlfriend Chinaza stood by his side as he wept before the people. However, behind closed doors, they jubilated, knowing that their dreams were finally becoming a reality. At last, the throne is mine, he said to Chinaza, who hailed him and called him her king. You will rule the great kingdom of Umocha, and not even death can stop you, she said to Prince Obidi, who smiled and began to prepare for his coronation. Moments later, the chief priest of the village called on the prince who knelt before him, ready to be crowned. The chief priest lowered the crown onto his head. However, the moment the crown touched the prince's head, Prince Obidi began to scream at the top of his voice. His body shook violently as the crown slid off his head and rolled to the ground. Everyone opened their mouths in shock as they wondered why this was happening. The priest believed that it was a mistake, so he picked up the crown again and placed it on Obidi's head. However, the crown burned hot and leapt away, as though rejecting him entirely. A dreadful silence fell over the people. The chief priest raised his staff and decreed that the crown had rejected the prince. Prince Obidi's eyes widened in terror as he tried to understand what was happening. No, I'm the son of the king. I'm the rightful heir. The crown is mine, he said to the chief priest, who shook his head and revealed that the throne of Umocha cannot be deceived. The crown will choose its owner, he said as he summoned the entire village for the crown choosing exercise. According to the tradition of the land, whenever the crown rejects the head of the proposed subject, a crown choosing exercise will be carried out, where the people will wear the crown one after the other until the rightful heir is found. Prince Obidi could not believe his ears. He stood there and watched as his dream slipped away from his fingers. Chinaza, seeing that the prince had lost the throne, started to distance herself from the prince. She now stood a chance of being the queen herself and could not risk losing it because of the prince. The entire kingdom gathered in front of the king's palace for the crown choosing exercise. The air was thick with tension, and no one spoke above a whisper. The golden crown rested on the royal stool as the people lined up to be tested. One after the other, the villagers came forward, the warriors, the hunters, the elders, and even children. But each time the crown was lowered, it slipped away and rejected them too. The people could not help but murmur in fear. Everyone was tested, including the maidens of the land and the guards. When it got to Chinaza's turn, the people opened their mouths in shock as the crown rested on her head longer than every other person. Chinaza could not contain her excitement. "He chose me," she said excitedly, as everyone's eyes shone in disbelief. Her father rushed forward to jubilate with his daughter, when suddenly A lightning bolt cracked from the sky and struck them dead before the people. The crown fell from her head as the people all opened their eyes and mouths in shock. Just as they fell to the ground unconscious, Awuli emerged from the palace prison. The prison doors opened miraculously as Awuli stepped out into the crowd. The chief priest caught sight of her and insisted that the crown be placed on her head. Everyone had worn the royal crown except for her. Awuli knelt there as the chief priest placed the crown upon her head. Her eyes opened in that instant as everyone watched in amazement as the crown balanced on her head and refused to fall. The entire village fell on their faces as the chief priest began to speak. Behold, the true heir has been revealed. The throne of Umocha has finally chosen its ruler. Prince Obidi could not believe his eyes. He challenged the chief priest, asking how this was possible, and the chief priest revealed to him that Amuli was the hidden daughter of his father, the king. In fact, she was his twin sister, who came out first before him. When they were born, a revelation came that the king's first daughter would be the one responsible for the death of the king. The revelation did not stipulate how or when this would happen, so the king, in a bid to prevent this from happening, cast his own daughter away immediately after her birth. What he did not know was that he was fulfilling the revelation. The moment Anwuli was pushed on the throne on that fateful day, her reign in the spirits began and that of the king ended, leading to his strange death. The people gasped as they began to whisper among themselves. The chief priest lifted his staff into the sky as he began to speak. Umocha, hear me. The throne does not lie. The blind maiden you mocked, this child you rejected, is no ordinary girl. She is the true firstborn of the late king, the one cast away into the forest out of fear. The prophecy said that the first daughter will bring about the end of the king's reign, and indeed, it has come to pass, for the king himself sealed his fate the day he abandoned her. Prince Obidi stumbled forward, his face pale with fury. Lies, all lies. She is nothing but a servant. She is not my sister. I am the heir, because I am the son of the king, he said as he looked at Anwuli, whose head now held the crown that rejected his. The chief priest turned to Obidi, his voice stern as he began to speak. Obidi, you are indeed the son of the king, but you are not the heir. The blood that came first from your mother's womb is the blood chosen to rule. Anwuli was born before you, cast into the forest and left to die, but the gods kept her alive through the help of the great hunter who found her and kept her safe. You mocked her blindness, yet it was the same blindness that preserved her and prepared her for the throne. Anwuli rose to her feet in that moment, her eyes now open as she saw for the very first time, her voice calm as she began to speak. I was thrown away because it was said that I would cause the king's death, but I never lifted a hand against him. I sought only to serve, even as a maid. Yet, destiny cannot be overturned, not even by the hands of men. The throne has chosen me, and I have accepted to rule Umocha, not with pride, but with justice. As she finished speaking, the entire village fell on their knees as they began to hail her name. Even Obidi fell to his own knees, his voice breaking as he apologized to his twin sister for all that he did to her. Anwuli turned her gaze to him as she forgave him, saying, Obidi, you hated me, mocked me, and tried to disgrace me. Yet, you are still my brother. I do not seek your destruction, only your change of heart. That was how Anwuli became the first queen of Umocha, and the prophecy was fulfilled, as the king's death gave birth to a queen whose name was remembered for generations. Her reign brought peace, justice, and prosperity, and she ruled not only with wisdom, but with great insight and compassion, deeper than power. The lesson to be learned from this story is that destiny cannot be stopped, no matter how men try to fight it. Anwuli, though blind and despised, carried a greatness hidden beneath her weakness. She was mocked, rejected, and even cast away. Yet, the very thing people thought disqualified her became the proof of her strength. Power does not belong to those who boast or oppress others, but to those chosen through humility, endurance, and character. We must learn never to look down on anyone, for the stone the builders reject may one day become the cornerstone. I hope you enjoyed the story.